Hello and a warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us here in the Van Oord studio for this event as part of the Climate Adaptation Summit 2021. Today, we are really proud to launch the Climate Risk Overview. This is a tool which is going to help us to identify the areas in the world that are most at risk of the implications of climate change. This tool should be a trigger to collaborate and start climate adaptation action. Van Oord is launching this tool as part of our Climate Adaptation Action Plan, and I'm really excited to go to the launch now with our CEO, Peter Van Oord.
Hello and welcome, distinguished guest. My name is Peter Van Oord. I'm the CEO of Van Oord, a global marine contractor with over 150 years of experience. Our work focuses on coastal defense, dredging, offshore wind and other offshore infrastructure. We're working on the verge of land and water. We are involved in iconic works such as the Palm Jumeirah Islands, the current innovation and renovation of the Afsluitdijk and the Gemini Wind Park in the Netherlands. The purpose of our company is to create a better world for future generations using marine ingenuity. And every single one of us is and will become more and more affected by the impact of climate change, be that droughts, floods, storms or rising sea levels. And in many of the world's coastal areas, we already see countries having to cope with these implications of these challenges. And this can be large cities dealing with flood risk, but also agricultural regions facing problems of food security, livelihood and prosperity. And we at Van Oord feel it as our obligation to make our adaptation expertise and solutions accessible. We want to accelerate the exchange of knowledge and public-private partnerships, and we want to mobilize parties for the required finance to address the issues in front of us. As part of the celebration of our 150-year anniversary 2 years ago, we had the honor to host former Executive Secretary of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, Christiana Figueres. And she gave a powerful speech, emphasizing the need for action to limit the effects of climate change, and particularly for the world's most vulnerable communities. We have therefore taken up the challenge and developed within Van Oord the Climate Adaptation Action Plan. And this plan encourages meaningful dialogue between relevant parties. And this should result in solutions to create a better world for future generations.
Our climate is changing. We need to adapt for future generations. That's why we have C, Sustainable Earth Actions. Within this game-changing program, we have launched the Climate Adaptation Action Plan. A plan that features new perspectives for communities, cities and governments. With new insights about vulnerable areas, thanks to the Climate Risk Overview, an interactive tool with many different layers to see how the local sea level rise is affecting, for example, coastal erosion, biodiversity, and the number of people impacted by extreme weather and flood risks. The action plan is an eye-opener to climate adaptation solutions that focus on how marine ingenuity can help us to protect the coast, how nature can play a part in this, and how we, in turn, can help nature. Let's share and connect visions in the Knowledge Hub, an international network at the highest level, where powers and knowledge accumulate and combine in areas such as oceanography and ecology, impact, and even finance. Because we need to join forces as part of our ambition for this global agenda. We'd like to help you with your challenge by identifying the risks early and together, to investigate them, share thoughts, and come with solutions. There's no time to lose. It's time for climate adaptation action. Let's connect.
As you saw in this video, our plan consists of 3 key elements: the climate risk overview, the climate adaptation solution, and the knowledge hub. Today, we're launching the climate risk overview. This is a global tool that will enable us to focus our efforts on the most vulnerable coastal locations. With this tool, we can identify the areas most at risk and take action. The climate risk overview brings together key parameters such as population, flood exposure, low-lying land, coastal erosions, and ecology in a visual map. Almost all data is from open sources and is mapped onto 10-kilometer stretches of the world's coastline. Within the tool, filters can be applied to the different parameters to help you narrow down to a selected number of hotspots, depending on your perspective. You can save, share, learn about your choices. Most importantly, we welcome you to connect with us to find out more and discuss how we can collaborate further and take action to support those hotspots, which are identified by the climate risk overview. We would like to highlight that we do not undertake this task alone. The climate risk overview has been reviewed by multiple industry professionals, and we also thank them for their support. In addition, we work closely with the Global Centre on Adaptation, where our climate risk overview also contributes to their knowledge platform, addressing the state and trends in adaptation knowledge. And we look forward to the formal handover with the GCA later this year. But for now, it is with great pleasure that I would like to officially announce the launch of the Van Oord Climate Risk Overview. Thank you.
So, you heard it here first. Van Oord has launched their climate risk overview. How exciting. As Peter mentioned, it's really important that we use this to get different perspectives and drive collaboration on climate adaptation action. Let's hear from some key figures about their view on the climate risk overview and also on how to take climate adaptation action. So here are some statements from Patrick Verkooyen, the CEO of the Global Centre on Adaptation, the Mayor of Rotterdam, Mr. Abu Talib, and also Jan-Peter Balkenende, former Prime Minister of the Netherlands.
The GCA acts as a global solutions broker on adaptation action, sharing and scaling the best tools, practices and ideas to strengthen resilience against the impacts of our changing climate. Our State and Trends in Adaptation report and online knowledge exchange is part of our commitment to fulfilling this mission, to enable practitioners, policymakers and other stakeholders to exchange information, enable learning and build a global community of practice around adaptation efforts. Van Oord's Climate Risk Overview is a core contributing element to this initiative and will play a key role in broadening understanding of climate risks and opportunities. Users of the platform will be able to access the expert knowledge of Van Oord is combined with other critical factors relevant to climate adaptation. GCA works with partners like Van Oord in our role as solutions broker, bringing together governments, the private sector, knowledge institutions, civil society and other international organizations to accelerate adaptation action. Van Oord's Climate Risk Overview is an example of the invaluable role of the private sector. At GCA, we will continue to collaborate with partners in all sectors that are equally committed to strengthening the resilience of societies vulnerable to climate impacts. So join us, and together we can adapt our world.
Hello there. Climate adaptation and resiliency require a joint effort from public and private parties. especially for communities and cities that are most vulnerable when it comes to climate change. It's therefore that I appreciate the leading company from Oord, the Dutch company from Oord, for developing a climate risk tool which will be presented today to the Global Center on Adaptation. This free tool will help us to highlight where to accelerate action when it comes to climate change. And therefore, I'm happy to endorse this private initiative.
Jan-Peter, welcome to the studio. Really nice to have you here with us. You've been lucky enough to see the climate risk overview during the early development stages. What's your opinion of the tool and what do you think it will achieve?
From the beginning, I was very enthusiastic because the idea behind the overview is really great. What is happening in the world? What is vulnerable? What are the risky coastal areas? And the good thing is that open source data are being used. And of course, this is about creating awareness and thinking about possible solutions. So I'm a big defender of the overview.
The climate risk overview is just the first step in Van Oord's broader climate adaptation action plan. What do you think about the broader plan and how do you think we can work together to bring climate adaptation more to the fore?
As you know, for a long time, people have been discussing how to stop climate change, but for the time being, that's not possible. It will be there. So therefore, climate adaptation is key. It's very, very important. And that also means that we have to try to find the solutions. And I think this is what Van Oord is doing. It's clear this is not only a government responsibility. It's really a matter for everyone. And therefore, it's so good that Van Oord has said, we have our own responsibility and we will do our utmost to try to find solutions. So I think it's a great initiative of Van Oord to be active in this way.
Great. You mentioned it's not just a political challenge for governments, but everyone needs to come together. What would you advise Van Oord to do to take the next step now? How can we provoke the discussion? How can we make sure that we bring on board all the right stakeholders in the climate adaptation arena? How do we go from talking to action?
In fact, it's all about the global ecosystem. You need everyone. If you want to reach success, we need governments, knowledge centers, NGOs and businesses. And I think this is really what it's all about. That's one. So you must work on having such a global ecosystem. And the second point is, it's a matter of convincing the financial parties and governments to invest, to do the right things, because we need action now.
It's really thrilling to feel the support of such key figures, and I thank them for their kind words about our climate adaptation action plan. The second part of the climate adaptation action plan addresses solutions. With our over 150 years of experience, you can imagine Van Oord bring to the table a lot of knowledge and expertise in delivering climate adaptation solutions around the world. Some really great examples of this are Sali in Senegal, which you see behind me here on the screen, but also the Afsluitdijk, which we're not only strengthening and renovating, but we're also innovating with ideas like the fish migration river. What we see at Van Oord is that we need proactive partnerships and collaboration to deliver better solutions. This comes at the benefit of people, of planet, and prosperity. And I believe we can replicate these solutions around the world when we have the right partners. With the right partners, we bring together knowledge and collaborative ideas, and that's what's needed to accelerate the delivery of climate projects to protect the most vulnerable coastlines around the world. That brings me nicely to the third element of our climate adaptation action plan, the knowledge hub. Through this, we can exchange expertise and create a better world for future generations. In this light, I'd like to share with you the conversation I had with David Howlett, where we talked about the importance of collaboration and his role with the new UN Climate Champions Programme, the Race to Resilience. Hi David, thanks for joining us. You're a member of the UN Climate Champions team. It'd be really great if you can tell us about Race to Resilience and why it's so important.
It's about mobilizing businesses, investors, civil society, academia, and other cities and regions and other non-state actors to take action. And it has the goal of building the resilience of over 4 billion people by 2030. So Race to Resilience, it's a 10-year campaign. It is a formal campaign of the UN. It's been launched at the Climate Adaptation Summit. So the UN Secretary General is seeing this as a very important part of his ambition to build a resilient future. It's closely linked to the UK COP26 presidency and their campaigns on adaptation resilience.
That sounds like a great programme, David. Resilience is a really broad concept though, so what does it mean for you and how do you measure it?
On resilience, the champions thought long and hard about this. What would be the sort of metric or the indicator they should be going for? Net zero is easy. You have the greenhouse gas metric. But we thought we'd want to make this campaign a people-centered campaign, and all businesses are full of people and want to make people resilient. Businesses have suppliers and consumers, they're all people. It's going to be challenging for some to demonstrate the impact. I know for Van Oord, you're doing excellent work on building coastal resilience, and you can probably tell me how many people you've actually made resilient, and the quality of that resilience is also crucial. So that's why we're going for people, but we're also saying it has to be working with nature. So nature is crucial to both helping us reduce emissions and also building resilience.
What an impressive programme with very clear metrics. But let's talk about the business case for businesses to actually invest in resilience.
Two reasons why businesses and investors need to think about this. One is it's self-interest. If you don't think about risk of climate to your business, then your business is at risk. But then there's also opportunities by investing in resilience to deliver community and social benefits as well as economic benefits and financial benefits to the organizations. And this has to be global. So it's also about encouraging private investment into the developing countries. That's really important.
That's a really clear answer, David. Thank you. We at Van Oord think we have some really concrete business cases to bring forward for climate adaptation. What would you advise us to do?
Working with other areas of business or investors, particularly the financial side, so that we've spoken to a number of commercial banks as well as development banks and insurance asset managers, is come together on that. Where are the opportunities for these investments in resilience, which will benefit companies because there's more investment. It will benefit hopefully people and communities because that investment will be building their resilience. And also, hopefully, it will benefit the investors themselves by getting a return on their investments, which is also delivering really strong social and environmental benefits as well.
Thanks, David. That's really clear advice. I'd like to conclude our discussion now by asking you to make a call to action to our audience.
Do join us in the race to resilience, which is aiming to increase the delivery of action, increasing investment. So launched at the CAS today. Join us and join the champions in their leadership to a more resilient and thriving planet and businesses and people. Thank you.
How inspiring to hear from David about the race to resilience, but also the importance of the involvement of the private sector. As he said, investing in resilience isn't just about survival, it's about making space and security to allow nature and communities to actually thrive. And with investment and financing in mind, I would like to introduce our next guest, Frank Heemskerk. Frank is the Secretary General at the ERT, the European Roundtable for Industry, and he was formerly the Executive Director at the World Bank Group. Welcome, Frank. Thank you for joining us. It would be really nice, could you give a short introduction to yourself and also explain the European Roundtable on Industry?
Yes, thank you. My name is Frank Heemskerk. I started my career in banking, ABN AMRO Bank. I was active in politics, member of parliament for the Dutch Labour Party and Minister for Trade. I retired from politics, was on the board of Haas Koning DHV. I was the CFO, which is an engineering consulting firm. And then I was asked to become the Dutch Executive Director, board member of the World Bank, which I did for over 5 years. And last year in 2019, I joined the European Roundtable for Industry. The European Roundtable for Industry was founded in the 80s, and actually it's a gathering of the CEOs of the, let's say, the leading European global firms. We issued last month at the 5th anniversary of the Paris Agreement, we issued a flagship report on the Green Deal, making most of Europe's climate leadership, where we don't discuss the whether the Green Deal should happen. No, it's much more about how it should happen, and it has strong corporate commitments, but also strong personal commitments from the CEOs on climate neutrality in 2050, also meeting the target of reducing CO2 emissions by 55% in 2030. But again, all of that is much easier said than done. So we also come up with a lot of proposals on the how, because it will be a challenge, but I'm convinced it can be done.
Very clear, Frank. And in the policy report which you refer to, there are absolutely some very concrete how statements on how European businesses are going to address, but it's dominantly focused around, for example, reducing emissions for climate change. But I think we all recognise that in the coming period, climate change is already happening, and even if we're carbon neutral by 2050, we will still all be very much impacted by climate change, and that's our businesses as well. It's a big risk for them, also for their supply chains. So how do you see also addressing the climate adaptation challenges?
Yeah, well, it's not only mitigation, it's also climate adaptation. There, by the way, I think that the Netherlands has a lot to offer in terms of knowledge. We've been dealing with climate adaptation over centuries. So we need to make sure that the knowledge which is available is being shared. It's also working together globally. That was one of your earlier questions, through the global financial institutions. I'm very happy to see that, for example, World Bank and IMF are clearly, let's say, also focusing on climate change, because it's a global risk. It's a global financial risk. That's why IMF is, let's say, challenging their members also from a financial point of view, how they are incorporating climate risk in their financial systems. Similar, the World Bank, it are always the poor who are paying, let's say, the price, and to make sure that a climate change program is not only efficient, but it's also effective, and that it's fair and it's equitable. That's why it's so important that these global institutions also sing their song and play their part.
Frank, one of the key elements of this whole discussion is, of course, financing and green financing. Can you say something about that?
There, I think it is still mixed. How it is, I hear a lot of, let's say, I've talked to CFOs of the global European companies who have been a bit disappointed by the fact that they're not really challenged by investors on their green pipeline. And unfortunately, there are still too many shareholders and investors who are looking to the quarterly results. So I think making sure that there is the right pressure and the right question and the right dialogue with the investors is important, but also building, let's say, and in that sense, by the way, Van Oord, let's say, with a family ownership and a long-term horizon, I think is in a strong and in a very good position. And unfortunately, some of the, let's say, listed companies with quarterly focused analysts are disappointed by these analysts and the conversation with them. But the real challenge, of course, then also is build up the pipeline and make sure that, let's say, that green will also be rewarding. And we're not there yet, unfortunately.
And do you talk now about developing business cases in the right way so that people see green as rewarding, or do you have other perspective on it?
Well, on the one hand, it's being innovative and coming up with smart green solutions, and thereby having a competitive advantage. But ultimately, if we as consumers, if we as citizens don't reward green solutions, and if we don't buy the green products, we're also not going to get there. So it should be the client being either governments or us consumers, or let's say rewarding the suppliers with the green products and get recognition from it, which really ultimately makes a change. Governments can incentivize, governments can and should regulate, governments can stimulate, but ultimately it's up to us, it's up to society to make the change.
I think that's a really strong message, Frank, actually. So we all vote with our feet, actually. With every time we go in the shop, we're voting. So, yeah.
It's us as consumers, it's us as citizens, it's us as voters. And if we reward those who are showing leadership on the Green Deal, on inclusivity, then I'm convinced we can get there.
Thanks, Frank. You really have a very clear vision. I'd like to conclude our discussion by asking you to make a call to action to our audience.
Yes, only if we are competitive, we can deliver on a Green Deal. Only if we accelerate also the digitalization of Europe. And without digital, no Green Deal. Only if we continue to invest in skills, in people, we can deliver on the Green Deal. Only if we, let's say, build public support, not only with the young, but also with the relatively older people, with the middle class. If we can make clear that it's a transition, which is not for free, it's also costly, but it can be turned into a competitive advantage. It can create the new jobs of the future. It will create a better planet. Europe, let's say, can show leadership to the rest of the world. If we can, let's say, all show, not just, if we can also walk the talk, I think we can, I'm convinced we can deliver.
Thank you, Frank, for your clarity on the role of your constituents, large companies like Van Oord, to accelerate climate initiatives. As you highlighted, is an absolute responsibility for financial institutions to make investments, for governments to incentivize us, but also for us as citizens to take our responsibility and act effectively with a long-term view in mind. It's clear from what you've said that we can all contribute, and we can all contribute in our own way. We can bring our knowledge, we can bring our expertise, and with those capacities, we can collaborate, act together, and make things happen. And that's why we're here today, to connect and accelerate action on climate adaptation. I would like to extend a great thank you to all the guests who have spoken today, Peter Van Oord himself, Patrick Verkooyen, Mr. Abitaleb, Jan-Peter Balkenende, David Howler, and Frank Heemskerk, and thank them for their insights and also the clear vision they all have on accelerating climate adaptation action. But we also need you. In the chat, you'll find a link to connect with us, but you can also alternatively just connect directly with me on LinkedIn. By connecting with us, we'll be able to have the opportunity to share with you more about our climate risk overview and our further climate adaptation action plan. And we would also like to hear from you. We would like to hear your knowledge, your expertise, and your insights. So let's connect and join us on this journey. And with that, I would like to thank all of you for tuning in and joining us here today. I hope we can meet and collaborate in the future. Have a wonderful day.